Last year, we lost the founder of ASGCT, Dr. George Stamatoyannopoulos, and in order to remember him, I've asked one of his colleagues at the University of Washington, Hans-Peter Kiem, to do a short presentation remembering George. So, Hans-Peter.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor and privilege to give this tribute to George Stamatoyannopoulos, who passed away on June 16th last year at the age of 84. George was a larger-than-life personality. He was a brilliant physician scientist, scholar, teacher, natural leader, and most of all, a mentor to so many of us. He cared deeply for the young scientists and was passionate about supporting and promoting their careers. He was born in Athens, Greece in 1934, grew up during the Nazi occupation, and at the age of 17 entered medical school. He graduated top in his class in 1958 and then pursued research with Dr. Fessas. He was interested in population studies and investigated the malarial hypothesis, whether the sickle cell trait, G6PD, and thalassemia genes would confer resistance against malaria. And he studied this in 5 different areas in Greece. And then, of course, next, he made the seminal discovery that the fetal form of hemoglobin, which was elevated in some thalassemia patients with hereditary persistence, could dramatically improve the clinical course of these patients. And this, of course, led to his theory that thalassemia and sickle cell anemia could be generally treated by reactivating fetal hemoglobin, which has launched decades of research to cure these disorders with drugs, gene therapy, and now also gene editing. In 1964, he was recruited by Arno Metalski to the University of Washington, together with his wife and lifelong close collaborator, Thalia Papayiannopoulou. He became a full professor in 1973 and directed the Medical Genetics Division at the University of Washington from 1989 to 2005. In 1978, he established, together with Art Nienhuis, the biennial hemoglobin switching conferences. The name of these conferences, of course, reflected George's conviction. If we understood how the globin genes switch from the fetal to the adult program and found out how to control this switch, we could cure thalassemia and sickle cell disease. These meetings attracted and still attract hundreds of scientists from around the world, and he continued to co-organize the meeting for nearly 40 years, more recently with Doug Engel and also Doug Higgs. Many of us remember these meetings very fondly. They were held at different places, including the Airlie House in Virginia, in Oxford, and in Asilomar. And of course, I personally especially remember the wonderful times on Orcas Island, one of the many beautiful islands north of Seattle, for which he usually chartered the Victoria Clipper to get us all up there. The intensity of the meetings was quite incredible, and George was there from the early morning to late at night, and often again early morning, listening to every talk, looking at every poster, and discussing the science, encouraging the young scientists. He published more than 400 papers, 14 books, and received many awards. Shown here are the William Damashek Prize that he shared with his wife, Thalia Papayiannopoulou, and the Henry Stratton Medal from the American Society of Hematology. In 1992, he also served as the president of the American Society of Hematology. And then the birth of the American Society of Gene Therapy, and now Gene and Cell Therapy. I still remember when he sat down with some of us in Seattle in the mid-90s to discuss the idea. We, of course, were all very enthusiastic in Seattle, though some around the country were a bit more negative and concerned. Why do we need another society? Nevertheless, ASGCT was formed in 1996 with the specific purpose to be educational and scientific. The first meeting was in 1998 in Seattle. It was an incredible success. More than 1,600 investigators from around the world attended, and when George talked about the birth of the society, in this article, that should come back again on this slide, I hope. Did I do that? I'm sorry about that. Here. When he talked about the birth of the society in this article in 2010 in Molecular Therapy, it becomes clear how much he cared for the society and how this was his baby that he nurtured through good and through bad times. In recognition for George's role in founding ASGCT and organizing its first annual meeting, the George Stamatoyannopoulos Lecture was established. And in 2017, he also received the Sonia Skarlandis Public Service Award for his continued service and dedication to the society. So, button is. And then apologize. In his later years, George also dedicated again more time to his early passion, to trace the origins of the European and especially the Greek populations, rounding up his career with several very high-impact papers. So the time span between his first and last Nature paper was about 55 years. George also had many other interests. He was a scholar at heart with a love of history and philosophy. He had assembled one of the largest private collections of early printed books of classical Greek and Byzantine authors, and he cared deeply for his family, his wife Thalia, his two sons, John and Alexei, and his grandchildren. To remember and honor George's research and his contributions to cell and gene therapy, I invite you to join us for a memorial symposium in Seattle on September 16th later this year. Thank you.